At Hope County Animal Shelter, cage number 14 wasn't just another kennel. It was a warning. Inside lived Tank, a hulking, battle-scarred Rottweiler who bore the visible and invisible marks of brutal past. Rescued from an underground dogfighting ring, Tank was a survivor of savage cruelty, but what remained of him was fear and fury twisted into muscle and mistrust. His eyes were sharp, haunted. His growl sent shivers down even the most seasoned handler's spines. Protective gear was mandatory. Even then, no one lingered near him. He snapped at every hand, barked at every sound, flinched at every motion. Trainers labeled him a lost cause. Volunteers avoided him entirely. Tank hadn't felt grass under his paws or sunlight on his back in months. The word unfixable followed him like a shadow. On May 26, Grace, the shelter's weary director, made the call no one wanted to make. Tank was scheduled for euthanasia on June 2nd. A red circle on the calendar marked the end of his story. Or so they thought. 9-year-old Lily arrived at the shelter that same fateful week. Blind since birth, she carried a quiet kind of radiance, the kind that made people pause and smile without knowing why. Her father, a kind-eyed school janitor named Marcus, gently guided her through the kennels, explaining that she had been asking for a dog for over a year. But Lily had always insisted, not just any dog, the right one. I'll know when I find him. With her white cane tapping softly and her other hand brushing along each metal door, she moved slowly, deliberately, stopping now and then to let a curious nose sniff her fingers. Some dogs barked, some licked her hand, a few whimpered for attention, but Lily would smile, thank them, and move on. Then she stopped in front of cage number 14. The air felt heavier. Silent. Tank stood inside, not barking, not growling, just watching. Lily tilted her head, smiling. "You're the one, aren't you?" she whispered. The staff went rigid. Someone moved to pull her away, but Lily knelt calmly and reached through the bars. Everyone braced for the worst. A growl, a snap, but instead, Tank's ears lowered. His breathing softened. And then, as if surrendering to something long forgotten, the hardened, battle-worn dog leaned slowly into her tiny hand, the first touch he'd ever allowed. The staff froze, breath held, expecting the inevitable, a flash of teeth, a warning bark, a snap. But none came. Instead, the room was filled with an eerie, unexpected stillness. Then, breaking the silence, came a soft, trembling sound no one had ever heard from Tank. A low, mournful whimper. It was the sound of something cracking open inside him. Lily giggled gently, as if she had just been greeted by an old friend. "He's sad," she said, her small fingers stroking his battered jaw. "But he's not bad." Her father's voice shook as he urged her to come away. But Lily didn't move. She calmly sat cross-legged on the floor, just outside the bars, talking softly to Tank like he was the only soul in the world who needed her words. For 20 uninterrupted minutes, she whispered to him. When she finally rose and walked away, Tank watched her go, silent, still. Inside the office, the staff huddled around the surveillance footage, replaying the moment again and again. Tank didn't flinch from her. He didn't growl. He listened. And in that quiet moment between monster and child, something passed between them, something no training manual could explain. Grace, staring at the red-circled date on the wall, felt her stomach twist. It no longer looked like a scheduled mercy. It looked like a mistake. A terrible, irreversible mistake. Lily came back the next day, and the one after that. Every visit, she walked straight to cage number 14, sat down and waited. Tank began to change, slowly, subtly. He stopped pacing when she arrived. He stopped growling altogether. His ears no longer stood rigid in fear, but drooped softly whenever she spoke. By her 5th visit, he was sitting at the bars, tail tapping lightly against the concrete floor. Grace, who had been watching from a distance, finally approached. "Sweetheart," she asked gently, "why do you think he listens to you when no one else can get near him?" Lily tilted her head, smiling. "Because I can't see what he looks like. I only feel what's inside. And inside he's just tired, not scary." Despite this miracle unfolding, the board had already approved Tank's euthanasia. Procedures were in motion, but Lily, undeterred, stood tall and declared, "He's mine now." Her father hesitated, trying to explain they had no space, no money, no plan. But Lily placed a hand on his arm and said quietly, "Then I'll save him with my heart." Grace, eyes misting over, couldn't shake the feeling that something rare and beautiful was happening. In a last attempt to buy time, she picked up the phone and made a desperate call to a local news station. She had no idea the ripple that one call would cause. Within hours of airing, the news clip spread like wildfire. Millions watched, stunned, as a blind little girl gently stroked the head of a dog that once terrified grown men. Tank, the unfixable monster, now leaning into the touch of a child. Headlines raced across the internet. Beauty tames a beast, and Asterisk, the blind girl who sees with her heart. Asterisk people around the world were moved to tears. Donations poured into Hope County Animal Shelter. Thousands of emails flooded in. People offering to adopt Tank, to sponsor his care, to fly across the country just to meet him. But Lily's answer never changed. "He's waiting for me," she told reporters. "He chose me. I chose him." A retired veterinarian stepped forward, offering Tank a lifetime of free medical care. A seasoned dog behaviorist volunteered to work personally with Lily and Tank, ensuring a safe transition, and the shelter, overwhelmed and awestruck, made a decision no one had expected a week earlier. On the morning of June 2nd, 2025, the same day Tank was scheduled for euthanasia, the shelter canceled all other appointments. Instead of preparing a final injection, the staff decorated cage number 14 with balloons and ribbons. Grace stood by with a clipboard, not to sign a death certificate, but adoption papers. The red circle on the calendar no longer marked the end of Tank's life. It marked his rebirth. Under a bright morning sun and before a crowd of cameras, shelter staff, and tearful onlookers, Lily stood in a white dress beside cage number 14. The same place where a week ago, hope had seemed impossible. Her white cane tapped once against the floor as she took a steady breath, then knelt down gently. "Come, Tank," she called softly. For a moment, the world held its breath, and then he moved. Tank stepped forward, slow, sure, and completely unrestrained. No muzzle, no leash, just trust. The massive dog who once cowered and snapped at every touch walked calmly toward the small, blind girl who had seen his soul. A gasp swept through the crowd as Tank lowered his head and rested it gently in her lap. Lily smiled and stroked him as if it was always meant to be. Grace, the shelter director, stood beside them with trembling hands as she signed the final line on the adoption papers. "Officially yours," she whispered. Lily turned her face toward her voice. "I knew he was mine the moment he didn't flinch," she said simply. That day, Tank walked out of Hope County Animal Shelter not as a broken beast, but as someone's best friend. His head held high, his tail swaying with quiet peace. Tank was no longer the dog no one could handle. He was the dog that love had rebuilt. In the months that followed, Tank's transformation stunned everyone. No longer the snarling, trembling creature locked behind steel bars, he became Lily's constant companion. He followed her everywhere, trotting beside her to school, waiting patiently at her piano lessons, curling up near her feet during story time at the library. At night, he stood silent guard at the foot of her bed, alert but calm, as if protecting the light that had saved him. People often asked how she trained him so well. Lily would just smile and say, "I listen to him like he listens to me." Tank never growled again. His presence calmed anxious children and frightened animals alike. He visited the shelter weekly, lying quietly beside scared or aggressive dogs, gently nudging them in comfort, as if saying, "Asterisk, you're safe now. I was you once." Asterisk, inspired by their bond, Grace launched a new initiative called the Tank Trust Program, pairing misunderstood dogs with children who saw beyond behavior, who, like Lily, could see with the heart. Tank's story was turned into a best-selling children's book, inspiring kids around the world. Each copy included Lily's handwritten signature in Braille. And every time someone asked if she could really see the dog she'd saved, she'd say, "I didn't need eyes to find him. I just needed love." 1 year later, June 2nd was no longer a day marked by sorrow. It had become a celebration. Tank Day was born. The shelter overflowed with balloons, cheerful banners, and families lined up to adopt. Children licked ice cream cones, while volunteers shared Tank's story with wide-eyed listeners. At the heart of it all stood Lily, now 10, holding her best friend's leash with quiet pride. Tank stood tall beside her, wearing a blue bandana embroidered with his name. When Lily was asked to speak, she walked to the podium, Tank matching her every step. The room fell silent. "People said I saved him," Lily began, her voice trembling slightly. "But the truth is, he saved me too. I used to feel alone in the dark, but now I'm never alone. I have someone who's just as strong and gentle as I hoped for. We don't need perfect eyes to find perfect love." She knelt beside Tank as the crowd wiped their eyes. Cameras flashed, but neither of them flinched. The once feared dog nuzzled her softly, his eyes filled with peace. And so it was that a blind girl with a fearless heart and a little faith didn't just save a dog the world had given up on. She turned a monster into a miracle.